welcome to the first night of the Liberation Election Committee Meet the Candidate events. So today is going to be the first of 2 nights where we're going to be meeting the candidates who are running for the Liberation Committee. So, first of all, hi, I'm Rufaro, and this is...
Hi, I'm Ajay, and I'm your Vice President Voice at the Students' Union.
So we're going to be talking a little bit more about the Liberation Committee and all of the different people who are going to be running for it tonight. But first of all, I'm going to give you a brief overview of how the night is going to go. Today we're going to have 3 panels with 4 different groups. The first panel is going to be the representatives, well, the people who are nominated to be the representatives for the LGBT plus representative and for the trans and non-binary representative. The second panel is going to be made up of all the nominees for the women's representative, and the final panel is going to be made up of all of the people who've been nominated for the disability, neurodiversity and chronic illnesses representative. Then what's going to happen is we're going to come back here to me and AJ and whoever has chaired the panel, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the things that have been discussed. But first of all, AJ, could you tell us a little bit more about the Liberation Committee?
The Liberation Committee are a group of students which identify with marginalised groups. So as previously mentioned, tonight we're going to have the Women's Rep, for example. So the Women's Rep will be responsible for ensuring that women's voices are heard and equally represented around campus.
Okay, cool. So how did the Liberation Committee first come about, AJ?
This is actually the 3rd year whereby we're doing the Liberation Committee elections, but this is the 1st year where we're doing an online voting system for students to vote. The Liberation Committee previously came about through an AMM motion, and the AMM stands for the Annual Members Meeting, whereby a student put forward a motion for there to be Liberation Committee reps, and that's what's happening tonight, whereby you guys are all able to vote for your next representatives.
Cool. So what is the importance of the committee and what are some of the responsibilities they have?
I feel like the committee plays such an important role because they represent marginalised students which might not necessarily have a voice, and the Liberation Committee are a group of representatives which are meant to represent students around campus and also put in place positive changes which would better represent their own groups.
Okay, so alongside the vote for the Liberation Committee, tomorrow the Students' Union is also going to be launching the elections, well, the voting for the Choose Your Own campaign initiative. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, so Make Your Change is your opportunity to influence the union's next big campaign. So the priority campaign was also put forward last year by AMM motion, which is whereby students are able to vote for one campaign they'd like to see run throughout the course of the year. The current the campaigns for this year have been shortlisted, and all students will be able to vote for the one campaign they'd like to see run throughout the course of the year. For example, one of them is suicide prevention, mental health, diversity and inclusion, but all the options are available online, so do check that out and make sure you vote.
Awesome. So yes, voting for the Choose Your campaign and for the Liberation Committee elections will open tomorrow. But first of all, we're going to meet some of the candidates. So the first panel that we're having today is for the LGBT plus representative and the trans and non-binary representative. These are going to be 2 different groups that you can vote for. However, we're going to combine the panels into one session for today. So today we have 2 candidates who are running for the LGBT plus representative and one nominee who's going to be running for the trans and non-binary representative. So the LGBT plus and the trans non-binary representative have done a lot of work in the past 3 years since the Liberation Committee has been around. For example, last year they submitted a motion to exec to kind of implement gender neutral toilets across campus. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over for the chair of the panel today, Lester.
Hello and welcome to the first Meet the Candidates in this year's Surrey Decides Liberation Committee. We are streaming live with the help of Stag TV, so a big thanks to all the volunteers here tonight. My name is Lester, he, him, and in this discussion we'll be hearing from the LGBT rep candidates and the trans and non-binary candidate. Before we begin, please remember that all candidates have volunteered to put themselves forward to be with us tonight. In the LGBT rep election, we have Nadia and Izzy are contending. In the trans and non-binary rep election, Nikolai Little is contending. So we're going to get straight in with the questions. First off, could we please introduce ourselves and why you've put yourself forwards? Nick, can we start with you?
Hi, I am Nick. My pronouns are he, him. I am a master's student currently doing creative writing, and I have put myself forward for trans and non-binary rep because as a transgender man, there are many things that I want to see happen on this campus. Last year was the first year that the trans and binary rep was introduced, and I've held that role for the last year. I've got to do so many awesome things, such as I've done some panels on LGBT, how gender links into it. Me and Izzy, as part of LGBT Society, created Pride Fest, and it's just some campaigns that I've started working on that I really want to see to the end.
Great, thank you very much, Nick. Nadia, please introduce yourself and why you're running.
Hi everyone, I'm Nadia. I'm final year international politics student, and I'm running because I want to give a bit more visibility to people who identify as queer but are not necessarily out and proud on campus, and I also want to give visibility to femme lesbians as myself. So yeah, that's why I'm running.
Great, thank you very much, Nadia. And finally, Izzy, please introduce yourself and why you are running.
Hi, my name's Izzy. I'm a final year music student as well as the current Vice President of the LGBT+ Society. I'm running for the Liberation Committee. I've always really liked what they've done. I was there at the very first election back in 2017 and I've been attending it ever since, so this is something I'm really, really passionate about. As for the LGBT+ role, bear with, I'm a bit nervous. As for the LGBT+ role, I've held a committee position within the society for 3 years now, and I think I'd just really love to spend my last year here at Surrey, just going that one step further and working with the union, the university and its staff and students to make this university as accepting and supportive for its LGBT+ people as possible.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. So our first big question tonight, as we are all here together, both LGBT rep and non-binary rep, are there any issues in which you'd like to work collaboratively with either the trans and non-binary rep or the LGBT rep, respectively? For let's do reverse order. Let's start with Izzy. How would you like to work with the trans and non-binary rep?
So firstly, I'd just like to say that I think I would work very well with the trans non-binary rep. I have a lot of trans and non-binary friends, and I think that I'd hope they'd agree that I'm quite a good ally. Nick, would you agree?
Great.
There we go. And one thing in particular I'd like to work on is I'd like to work with the accommodation department. At the moment, you can have accommodation beyond first year if you've got a disability, including autism and mental health conditions. But that doesn't include trans non-binary people, and often for them there's often a lot of prejudice and discrimination in the sort of private renting market, and also it can be hard to find people to rent with. That's something that I've been talking to with a lot of my trans non-binary friends as an issue that they've faced, and therefore I'd like them to have the option to have guaranteed accommodation on campus beyond first year, like I have as an autistic person. I think that they should more than be allowed to do that, and so I'd be very keen to work with the trans non-binary rep on talking with accommodation about making that happen.
Thank you very much. Nadia, how would you like to work with the trans and non-binary rep, whoever they may be?
Would like to work with the trans and non-binary rep in terms of getting societies and clubs more inclusive, because there is a big gap at the moment within the Students' Union when it comes to societies and clubs, with acceptance and support that they provide to trans and non-binary students. There is a big gap in knowledge and also in what committee members provide to ensure safety and inclusion to those members. So I think that is very important to start from small societies up to big societies and clubs, and build on a kind of trust network that could allow committee members to signpost trans and non-binary students if they need any further help, or just allow them to feel safe and accepted within whatever club or society they've joined.
So would that work within the scheme of the Wellbeing and Inclusion Champions?
Yes, absolutely. I will be happy to work with them as well. And I know that their training is upcoming next week, so all of the students that have applied, I would be more than happy to work with them and build on something that could mean more accepting student environment within the university.
Thank you very
I'm nervous.
Cool. Nick, as the trans and non-binary candidate, how would you work with the LGBT candidates collaboratively?
So something which I brought up during the election last year, which I've been trying to do, it's a lot bigger task than I was hoping it'd be, is we currently have something at this university called the Surrey process, which helps from disadvantaged backgrounds have access to higher education. So it helps by giving them extra applicant days so that they can get used to university environment. It helps them to submit some work before university so that they can see what university's like, what it'll be for them, and then it then helps get those grades lowered slightly to make it more inclusive. And currently a lot of minorities are represented under this, such as disability, BME, and I would really love to be able to get LGBT added to that because it's a characteristic that people don't often think about when it's still a very much minority. And it was through the Surrey program that I made it into university. So if I could help others who were in the same position as me, that would be absolutely amazing. So having the LGBT rep working with me would be a great way to go to the university itself and say this is something that students care about.
Yep. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to our third question. So a recent report by the Trendants suggests that around 2/3 of LGBT people experience mental health difficulties. The question is there the right support in place at Surrey? So Nadia, I think it's your turn to go first.
I think that we are starting to build this kind of support. I personally have seen a lot of people make effort in providing support when it comes to mental health issues, also raising awareness. A lot of campaigns during the Surrey Decides elections in February were built around mental health issues, and I'm very happy to see that people are speaking up about it. But I also think that we need to go one step further in providing LGBT students with any kind of networks or support that could help them actually build on their confidence and live their truth to the fullest. And especially introducing people throughout social media who are actually out and proud on campus to give more visibility to the LGBT community, because I think that a lot of people when they come to university are scared of living their truth because they don't see a lot of role models. And I think that's going to be nice to build on that and make sure that people, when they first come to university, feel accepted and welcomed and part of this community.
Yep, thank you very much. Let's go, Izzy.
Sure. When it comes to mental health support, I think it is important that we do get intersectional and talk about how it is to face a mental health problem and be a person of colour, face a mental health problem and be LGBT in this instance. And I myself, I have been along to the Centre for Wellbeing to talk to them about how their staff are trained in LGBT plus issues. And the fact is they are well trained, and I've had a look at, and they've told me about the sort of training they receive, and it is thorough. However, I think a lot of students aren't aware of that. And as an LGBT plus person, if you know that you need some sort of counselling or anything from the Centre for Wellbeing, you may think, oh, I'm scared to go here and talk about being LGBT plus because the counsellor I receive might, not be supportive of me or not understand me. And so I think something really important that I would work on as the LGBT plus rep would be to ensure that staff there are visibly in support of the LGBT plus community. There's a scheme going on at the moment with staff, I believe it's called Friends of...
Rainbow Allies.
Rainbow Allies, there we go. In which staff can have like a little sort of sticker on their door which shows that they're actively supporting the LGBT plus community, not just that they say they're an ally, but they've actively shown that they are. So having staff in the Centre for Wellbeing wearing these, having them on their doors would make such a difference, because then an LGBT plus person can see that little signal, know, okay, this person understands a bit of what I might be going through, and this is someone who I can be open and honest to. So that's, I'd say.
So, I mean, you two both talked about visibility. I mean, in the past year, we've got these, so Do you think that has increased visibility? You two are both final year students. I mean, Nick as well, but we'll get to it. But do you think campaigns like that has also raised visibility? You both mentioned it in your last.
I think in terms of like visibly seeing like rainbows on campus and stuff. Some people may argue that it's they're just showing rainbows to look inclusive, but in reality. Myself as an LGBT plus person, I remember when I first arrived at Surrey, I saw someone hanging a rainbow out of their office window, and I thought, and that made me feel really welcome, because even though it was just one person, it also showed that this person feels confident enough to be openly LGBT plus at this university. Yep. I love the rainbow crossing. Mm-hmm. I hope so. It's really nice, and I think the fact that there's so many visual. Signs of visible things on campus, like the lanyards and the Rainbow Allies scheme. I think that it does go a long way.
Nadia, would you like to add anything to that?
I had a similar experience to Izzy's one. When I first came to uni, I saw one person hang a rainbow flag out their window in student accommodation. No, it wasn't student accommodation. I doubt that. But it was a similar experience, and once all of the rainbow lanyards were introduced, I was one of the first people to run and get one. Yep. And now seeing so many rainbow lanyards around campus has made me feel so welcomed and so accepted within this community, and seeing people around all of the campuses wearing them, from estates and facilities to lecturers. It's amazing the support that the LGBT community has received in the past few years within campus. It is absolutely brilliant, and I can't thank enough to all the people that have started this movement.
Thank you very much. So I'm gonna let Nick answer the original question, and also add a little bit of a caveat on that to go on from what these two are saying. So we're talking about mental health and if Surrey has the right support in place. So we were talking about visibility, and obviously the visibility that we have is rainbows. Would you like there to be more visibility as well for trans and non-binary people?
I think definitely visibility is a big thing. With mental health, it is such a huge issue in the trans and non-binary community. The statistic is now that over 50% of trans people will attempt suicide. And I'm not ashamed to say I'm one of the people who have. And whilst there is amazing things this university are doing, there's always more. I think what we're doing with Centre for Wellbeing and with the union has been going great, but it's the university we need to tackle. So when I told my personal tutor I was transgender, he told me not to transition. That is the kind of thing we need to stamp out. I have been working with the staff network over the last year to do a personal tutor training, and I was shocked when I found out it isn't really compulsory. No. You have to do it once and then never really again. Yep. And they just throw together a bunch of case files and you get to pick which ones you look at. Mm-hmm. So whilst we have now in the last year added some more LGBT and trans non-binary case files, they can still pick to just not look at those ones. And
is that in the staff training specifically?
With personal tutor training.
Personal tutor training, okay.
And as a pure personal tutor, you are saying, I want to be hands-on with these students in the most intimate details of their lives. You then can't go, actually, I don't like you. Yeah. So I feel like it's within the university itself, and the staff is what we need to tackle. Mm-hmm. So seeing the staff with the rainbow lanyards has been so good. Working with the staff network has been amazing. Like when I met my dissertation tutor, and the first thing we discovered was, oh hey, we're both queer, this is amazing.
So it's a nice thing to do.
Yeah, there are such good things that are happening, we just need to step up on those not so good things.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick. So we're going to move on to the next question. Are there any particular barriers to engaging with university life, be it social or academic, that you feel the union should be championing? Let's go to Izzy, I think. Yeah?
Could you come back to me?
Yep, no worries. Nadia, are you okay to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I think that university should be championing more inclusivity, because as I previously mentioned, a lot of teams, clubs, societies are not inclusive enough due to ethnic background or just personal thoughts, how committee members perceive things. And I think this is a big barrier to incoming students who face the challenges of being for the first time in university and being queer. I think that's what me personally struck me most when I first came to uni. I came out to my family 6 months before I came to uni. I didn't have any role models, and once I came into uni, there wasn't much of inclusivity or visibility to LGBT people, whether within staff or students. I came later to find the LGBT society, but late enough to not sign up and feel a bit ashamed of not signing up during Freshers' Fair. But I think that visibility is the biggest barrier that the university faces, because even within readings, when it comes to studying different subjects, we don't see a lot of queer people, or we don't see a lot of women listed within the reading lists. Okay. And I think that is a problem as well, because a lot of people go onto the reading list before they accept the offer from the university, go through it, and they don't recognise themselves.
So how should the union be championing that particular?
I think that the union and the university should be championing this by just giving a bit more voice to that, okay, and mentioning it to university staff, and just making sure that at least this step has been taken. So speaking about it, just saying people's names if they haven't been mentioned, but they should be recognised.
Okay. Nick, so what barriers are there to engaging with university life, social or economic? Oh, academic, not economic, sorry.
Academic's a whole different question.
we can talk about that for years. That the union should be championing.
My brain has gone blank for a second. Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yes. Are there any particular barriers to engaging with the university life, be that social or academic, that you feel the university should be championing?
So a lot of union social activities are usually to do with the club nights, when statistically LGBT people are more likely to suffer from issues such as alcoholism or drug addiction. And so I think having more social activities outside of this would be just a lot easier for those who do face these issues, so that it isn't a case of, well, the only real things that people like to do on campus are club nights. And whilst I'm aware there are other activities, such as the movie nights that are held, these aren't championed in the same way, that all of the money goes into Rubik's and, oh, look at these amazing acts. And the only LGBT thing that happens is Glitter Bomb, which is a club night, which we did our best. I personally didn't attend that, even though it was an event, because of my because of my own issues with alcoholism. And I'm not ashamed to admit that even though, because we as a society have been trying to focus on less alcoholic events, so we thought we'd throw one in. So it'd be nice to see the union do the opposite and focus on more non-alcoholic events that LGBT people with these issues can attend without this little fear in the back of their heads of, what if I slip?
Thank you. Izzy, we'll come back to you. Would you like me to repeat the question again?
Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit confused by the question.
That's all right. So, are there any particular barriers to engaging with university life, so whether that's social or academic life, that you feel the union should be championing?
I don't know if it particularly is the if I'm on the right line with this question, but I think it's worth mentioning anyway. I think the union should look into the way the students are talking about the LGBT plus peers, particularly on Surrey Fest. I think there needs to be something done, because in particular with the recent non-gender bathrooms being put into Rubik's, I've seen so many like ignorant comments, and the worst thing is people are liking them. People like, yes, there are a few people who are talking them down, but there are also a lot of people who are making jokes about it, and people are liking it. So I think one of the biggest boundaries at the moment for any LGBT plus person is just basically, I don't want to say existing at the university because that sounds a bit dramatic, but knowing that there's people at Surrey who are writing these things and liking these things. So I think really maybe the union should have more of a sort of push towards talking about why, because I don't think there was a good explanation as to why the non-gender toilets were put in on the social media. I think for a lot of people who weren't following the Liberation Committee, didn't know, and just came back to Surrey in September and saw there were no new toilets, and like, what's this all about? And I think a lot of them, if we had just explained to them, this is the reason why, it's more inclusive for trans people who in either male or female toilet can be, can have mean things said to them or worse, and it's also more inclusive for people who identify outside of those binaries. If we just explain that, I feel like so many people wouldn't have been making like snide little comments about it.
So the SU having kind of an educational purpose?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we're on to the final question. We will be wrapping up soon, and if we can keep these last answers as brief as possible. So we have around 17,000 students at the University of Surrey, so that's both undergraduate and postgraduate. I'm just going to say that because I'm a postgrad. What role do allies of LGBT plus people have in creating a more inclusive environment? So, Nick, would you like to start?
Be as loud as you can. So,
Pro-LGBT, yeah?
Yes, God. If you aren't pro-LGBT, maybe just go sit in a little corner and rethink that. But with being LGBT, being trans in particular, that there are times where someone will misgender me and I will keep quiet for my own safety. As an ally, you have the ability to stand up and say, this isn't right, with less personal fear of attack. Like, I'm not going to say people aren't going to go against you for being pro-LGBT, but as an ally, you have that extra protection that we don't have. If you see someone saying something, stand up and say, hey, that's wrong. If you're on Surrey Fest and you see someone talking about how horrible it is to be gay, or how the rainbow crossing is all the... who even knows what they're saying these days? You as an ally can step in and say, actually, I think you should rethink this. You can protect the person that is too upset to out themselves or shouldn't have to out themselves by showing them that there are people who care and people who don't think that you're a pile of trash just for existing. Even if you aren't going out and personally fighting homophobes, just by being loud and saying, I think being LGBT is pretty rad, there's one person who could now see you and go, maybe the entire world isn't against me.
Thank you very much, Nick. Izzy, what role do allies play for LGBT people and having a more inclusive environment?
I think Nick, knocked the nail on the head there. That was well done. I think Nick said it really well, but I think also consider the fact that LGBTQIA, the A stands for asexual, but it also stands for ally. So I would recommend that allies, get involved in the LGBT plus community because we don't want to be, sort of segregated into cis-het people and LGBT plus people. We want to live in a world where everyone can get along, and more specifically a university where LGBT plus people are treated the same way. So I would say. Getting allies involved themselves in our campaigns. So when we put on campaigns, of course, having LGBT plus people at the forefront, but also having allies involved. So not only are they sort of like learning more, but also showing that allies can be sort of part of the community.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Nadia, would you like to round things off for us tonight?
Yes, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of the allies who have been standing by the LGBT community, with the LGBT community, in all of the struggles that the community has had over the past 50 years. And I want to thank all of the allies within a certain department of the university that have been amazing and providing us with all of the reading that includes queer people and being amazing and being just the rainbows that we're all looking for at the end of the day.
Great. Thank you very much. That's all we have time for. So thank you everyone at Stag TV. Thank you all of the candidates. Now we're heading over to our friends at Stag Radio before we meet the women's reps candidate.
Hi, we're your Students' Union. We've been listening to your feedback, and here are a series of videos to explain some of the positive changes that we would like to see over the next year.
Hello everybody, my name is Amina and I'm here to talk about NSS results in regards to accommodation. The union are going to push the university to refurbish Band A and Band B accommodation to ensure the standards of accommodation are consistent. We as a union are also going to strive to ensure that students are allowed to pick which court they live underneath the band they choose. For example, if a student picks a Band C, they're allowed to pick if they want to live on Stag Hill Court or if they want to live on Battersea Court. Finally, we would like to push for the university to freeze all accommodation. So from this year onwards, the prices of accommodation will not increase. Thank you all for watching and I'm hoping to hear your feedback soon. Have a lovely day.
So that was the LGBT+, trans and non-binary panel. Just to recap, for the LGBT+ representatives, we had the nominees of Izzy and Nadia, and for the trans and non-binary representatives, we had the nominee of Nico. So I'm joined here with Ajay and Lester, Ajay being VP Boys and Lester being the person who's just chaired the panel. So there's like a lot to talk about in that conversation, but I just kind of want to get, what were your initial thoughts about what we've just heard?
I mean, 3 fabulous candidates and lots of, interesting discussions, especially around, visibility of LGBT+, and I mean, including in that is trans and non-binary. So very interesting discussions about things like visibility. So, I mean, Surrey, it has we've got a rainbow crossing, which is very visible. I mean, especially like I'm just coming to the end of my first year of PhD, and this is like, compared to my old uni, we've got the rainbow lanyards, like there's a big visibility. There's still, lots of issues that say trans and non-binary people face, and then still needs to be a bit more visibility up from that. So we had a good discussion about that, and that kind of tied into mental health as well, and whether LGBT+ people felt that the well-being Centre for Wellbeing was an approachable place for them to go to. We had a lovely discussion. I think they're all lovely candidates, and definitely go and vote for them, basically.
Yeah, so Ajay, seeing as you are in the Students' Union, are there any particular things that the candidates brought up that you think that you could see the Students' Union implementing, or that you think that the Students' Union is already working on? Yeah,
one of the points raised by Nadia regarding inclusivity within societies and sports club, and I think that's a very good initiative, because sports club and society are a very impactful group of students, and all students should have the right to join a sports club and society and feel included. And something that's been implemented this year are wellbeing and inclusion officers, which ultimately are responsible for ensuring that people within the society or on the committee are well looked after with regards to their mental health. And I feel like incorporating that, making sure that the wellbeing champions are also educated on both LGBT issues and trans non-binary issues is very important. Yeah, so I kind of want to raise some of the other ideas that some of the candidates brought up. One of the ideas that Nico brought up was the idea that we need to kind of create more Students' Union events that are not necessarily tied to alcohol or clubbing. So do you guys have any thoughts and opinions, experiences on that? I completely agree, and I think that's something the union has been doing throughout the course of the year, because we do acknowledge that not all students want to party, want to get drunk and have There should be alternative means of fun. So for example, we've had the big chill at Manor Park, and we also did one at Hazel Farm and previously on campus, whereby there's free food, there's games, there's activities to do that all students can come along, and it's during the day. So it's just a great alternative to just drinking and partying in Rubik's.
Yeah, and one of the ideas that Izzy brought up was the idea of having accommodation on campus for LGBT plus and trans and non-binary students throughout the course of their university degree. Do you guys have any thoughts, ideas on that?
Yeah, I mean, like, searching for accommodation is hard enough.
Yeah.
I mean, in LGBT life, you've got to come out every single day.
Yeah.
You've got to come out to, you know, your friends, you've got to come out to your parents, you've got to come out to your boss. You might have to come out to your boss. In some cases, you do have to, you know, come out to your landlord, and it's a bit awkward, and you don't know how your landlord might respond. Having that protection on campus for certain students is definitely something that the union should be looking at and definitely pushing for. I think, it's a big thing that we should be looking at.
Okay, cool. And this is a question for both of you guys. How do you think that the candidates, if they are eventually nominated, would be able to work with both the university and the students' union to kind of represent the groups that they are being nominated to represent?
I mean, I think Ajay can cover how they work with the union. The LGBT Rainbow Network is the staff network on campus, so they help lobby the university basically. So definitely working with them, talking to staff. So they were talking about staff training. So that's definitely how they can work with the university. I think Ajay's probably better at discussing how they work with the union.
I feel like there's several ways they could work with the union. Obviously, if they are elected to be on the Liberation Committee, they already have that group of students who are going to be their core network. And the Liberation Committee currently sits under the president, which is currently Gemma. So if one of the LGBT reps, for example, or like a black student rep and so forth, wanted to implement something, they can go directly to the president and say, this is what I want to do, this is how I'd like to be envisioned. And also to remember that within the Students' Union, there's 4 zones. So there's the voice zone, activity, community and support. So if, for example, the idea Nadia mentioned with regards to wellbeing and inclusion champions, with regards to students' wellbeing and mental health, for example, that could go through VP support. So there's 4 different zones whereby they could push forward the agenda, and also remember that the president is there to support them.
Lovely. So do you guys have any final thoughts on this panel?
I feel like it was a great panel, but one thing to also remind students is that you can only vote for the rep which you identify with, and that's a really important thing to remember, because if you don't identify with the community, you don't have the right to vote.
Exactly, and you know, if you do have the right to vote, use it.
Definitely.
Yeah. People fought for it. So, for those of you who are just tuning in, today is the first of 2 nights in which we're going to be meeting the candidates for the Liberation Committee. The first panel that we've just had and we've just wrapped up included the nominees for both the LGBT plus representative and the trans and non-binary representative. So these are people who are going to be working with all 4 zones of the Students' Union, as well as the university, to kind of champion the groups that they're hoping to represent. So it has been 101 years since women, well, some women first got the right to vote, but this has been our very first year in which all of our sabbatical leaders have been women. And speaking of women and voting, the next candidates that we're going to go to are going to be the ones for the women's representative. We have 3 nominees for this panel, and in a moment we're going to hand over back to the chair of the next panel, which is going to be Ajay, who is going to be speaking to all of the women's representatives.
Hi, we're your Students' Union. We've been listening to your feedback, and here are a series of videos to explain some of the positive changes that we would like to see over the next year.
Hi, my name's Ajay, and I'm your Vice President Voice, and I'm responsible for your academic representation. Some of the changes we'd like to see to ultimately better student experience with regards to assessment and feedback is implementing a survey on Surrey Learn, whereby students will be able to say, A, was the assessment and feedback useful? B, was the feedback on time? And C, was the marking criteria available to them before the assessment? Secondly, the marking criteria should be a lot more detailed and specific to enable you to know what you need to do to obtain a first in your assessment at second class, just to enable students to know what's actually required of them within their degree, and also to make sure that the marking criteria is given to you prior to your assessment. And lastly, making sure that lecturers are available to help students with any work or assignments, ensuring that they're not away on annual leave during exam season, as we do understand that it's a stressful period and you need as much help as possible. Thank you for watching. If you do have any questions or any queries, feel free to email me or visit me at the Students' Union. Hello and welcome back to Meet the Candidates. Today we'll be talking to the candidate who's running for Women's Rep. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Harriet. I'm a second year aerospace engineering student and I'm running to be your Women's Rep. One of the main reason that I'm running is that I'm really passionate about all of the issues that are facing women at Surrey, and I want to make sure that all of your voices are heard.
Great. So, because you're running for Women's Rep, how would you like to ensure that students who are women are equally represented on campus?
So I think one of the great things that's happened this year is obviously all the SABs are female, and I think that just shows how far representation is going. One of the points of my manifesto is adding a women's segment to the faculty voice forums, because I know as a woman in STEM, we're not that well represented, especially within the academics in our department, and having our own section where we can say either issues that are specific to us or even just issues that we feel strongly about, whilst making sure everyone's voices are heard, is going to work great. And I also think that working really well with the LGBT plus representative and the trans and non-binary rep will make sure that everyone is included in all of the feedback that we're giving.
Great. You mentioned about implementing that within the faculty voice forum. Are there any particular members of staff that you'd like to be included, or is it going to be a case of just students voicing their feedback to all relevant staff members?
I'd like to it be all relevant staff members, because obviously that way you can make sure that even if they're saying it to one staff member, the right one is going to hear it at some point. But obviously some of them apply more to others, so it might be that it's heads of department rather than specific lecturers, because a lot of the issues are to do, I know for women in STEM and women in, engineering, it's a lot more to do with the gender gap that there is at the moment, and that is probably more to do with the people that are a lot higher up and sort of deciding who comes into the uni and all of that. But I know for, say, FAST students, a lot of people have raised their concerns about the reading lists and how heavy they are on straight white men being the ones that they're being read. And so I think having it open to all staff would be great, because that way the ones that are there and the ones that do get their voices heard, it means that their concerns are going to be passed on to the relevant person.
Yeah. So because you previously mentioned the gender gap, because you previously mentioned the gender gap, are there any areas whereby you feel the university could do more to support women with regards to employability?
I think with regards to employability, I know the engineering department at the moment is doing a lot. So I'm part of the Women in Engineering Society, I'm their VP, and I know that the Mechanical Engineering Sciences department are starting a Women in STEM Day that they're hoping is going to become an annual thing, and they're having people come in and talk, and they're inviting all students, but also they're letting tickets go first to the women in the departments and the women across campus. And that's going to have talks from multiple people in industry, and also talks from people who have been on placement, so that everyone gets a feel for what it's like being a woman as an employed person. And I think one of the things that we could do campus-wide, so not just for women in STEM, would be to have more events like that, where it is a case of bringing in women who are in higher up positions, who are in leadership positions, who can talk about their experiences, the good ones and the bad ones, so that people know what worlds they're going into, know what careers they're interested in, and just get that little foot in the door that they need, because they're not the traditional person that place would employ.
Great. Because you are the women's rep, you also need to acknowledge other factors, such as women of colour might have different advantages in comparison to a white woman, a disabled person, class. How would you ensure that women are represented equally despite their differences?
So I think one of the main things for that would be working with all of the other reps, because I think my experiences as a straight white woman are very different to probably the majority of people here at Surrey. And so I think working with the other reps so that they can voice their concerns and their problems, and so that when we attack a problem, we can attack it with everyone's voices being heard. But I think also making sure that people know that you can come and talk to us, you can come and talk to the reps, me, any of us, about your issues, so that we can make sure that we hear as many problems, and so that we can have, you know, forums and things like that where people can talk to us, people can explain what difficulties they're having, so that the ones that I might not necessarily face as me, I will hear about through someone else, and we can make sure that we address those problems.
That's great. So patriarchy. Patriarchy is often spoken about from the woman's perspective, but we do understand that patriarchy can also have a negative impact on men. So what would you do as women's rep to also ensure that men's well-being are equally being represented and cared for?
So I think one of the main things at the moment that is affecting men is men's mental health. I think we all know there's such a huge stigma around it, and I think while obviously everyone is affected by mental health, I think because of the stigma and because of the way that people talk about it, it's not a common subject. And I think working with the disability, neurodiversity and chronic illness rep to make sure that when we have events for mental health and for support and things like that, we involve all students, whether they're male, whether they're female or not. I think that will really help. One of the points that's on my manifesto is having consent campaigns. And while I've done that to improve safety on and off campus for women, that is also such a big issue for men as well. Like, it's not just women that face these issues. And so I think just making sure that everything we do is as open and as accessible for everyone, I think that's really going to make a big difference.
Is there any campaign or anything in general that you'd like to see run which is specific to women? Because obviously you've got your great manifesto points, but say if you were to get elected, what's the one thing that you really want to implement throughout your course of the year?
So one of the things is the Copperfield Society. Currently is dormant. I know Dodgeball they do a fundraiser every year, and it goes amazingly. But I think having a society that works throughout the year and make sure that there's constant fundraising and there's constant education about the issues surrounding breast cancer, which isn't just a women's issue. It does affect men as well, but I think because it's so predominantly a women's issue, Copperfield themselves are trying to educate so many young women, and I think it would be a really great thing to have campus-wide campaigns about, because it's an issue that affects near enough everybody. And I think because it's so focused on women, it would be really nice to have that be one of the main things that I do this year.
Okay, great. You mentioned women higher up earlier. So in the Higher Education Statistic Agency reports show that 21% of heads of institutions are women. So considering women in the UK now make up 56% of the student body, what do you think needs to be done to address the gap in representation at university level?
I think one of the things is campaigning and making sure that the people that are on the boards and that are in the higher education departments and things like that know that we know there's an issue. Because otherwise they're going to keep hiring these men and they're going to think that that's okay. And so it would be nice to have, you know, some more activism across campus and things like that. I think also getting people involved in societies and in roles of leadership from our age, from when they're at university, is sort of the main way that we can make sure that later on that they are more even, because it's not that we can just say, okay, hire more women. It does have to be a case of, like, it's going to be a slow and steady race, but it will be nice getting more people to know that there are leadership positions available to them, getting more people networking with other people, and women that are more higher up in positions. And I think that would be a great way to slowly change that balance.
That's great. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
I don't think so. I think one thing that I would like to mention is that I know that I'm running for the women's rep, but I really want to represent all women. So I want to work really closely with the trans and non-binary rep and the LGBT plus rep to make sure that all women are represented, not just the people who society would think to be women.
Thank you so much, Harriet. We'd just like to remind you that in a women's rep election, we have Harriet running and also Aisha, who isn't able to join us, unfortunately, today. So you have three options when voting. You either vote for Harriet, Aisha, or Ron, which stands for Reopen Nomination. Just a reminder that you can only vote for the women's rep if you identify with the group and you prove yourself to be identify as a woman. That's all we have time for. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll now move on to the rep for disability, neurodiversity and chronic illness candidates. Thank you.
Hi, we're your Students' Union. We've been listening to your feedback, and here are a series of videos to explain some of the positive changes that we would like to see over the next year.
Over the year, the Union is here to represent every aspect of your student experience, from bringing people together to helping you through your challenging times. This year, final year students highlighted a big gap when it came to using your student voice, with 85% saying that they had the opportunity to give feedback. However, only 59% felt as though it had been acted upon, and as such, these results are being taken to the highest university committee. The same survey showed that the Union can do more to communicate your academic interests across to you, so this is what we're going to do about it. First off, your elected Union Officer Executive meet on a 3-weekly basis to discuss student proposals and support you guys in what you want to change. These meetings are going to be advertised more widely across the university campus to increase student attendance and increase your student voice. Secondly, we're updating the Union website to give you guys the chance to give feedback and ask questions. This will be a great way to help us shape what the Union does over the coming year. Finally, your SABs are going on tour. Over the coming year, we're going to be coming to talk to you as students across the university campus to find out what your priorities are for the coming year. Keep an eye out for those legendary red t-shirts. Come and have a chat, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
And that was the panel for the women's representative. So just to summarise, we had Ajay speaking to Harriet. Unfortunately, Aisha wasn't able to be here, but those were the one nomination that Ajay was able to speak to today. So there's a lot to talk about in that discussion. But Ajay, what were your initial thoughts?
I feel like it was a really good conversation because loads of interesting points were raised by Harriet, for example, representation of women, because women have played a key role throughout history, and I feel like women's voices should also be heard because we have a lot to say, and it's about time we voiced our opinions on certain situations and actually made changes, which better things.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about that. You talked about intersectionality, you talked about women in STEM, we talked about men's mental health. So are there any key thoughts or activities that she said that you think the Students' Union would be able to pick up or think about?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a lot of the things she mentioned is particularly relevant with the Students' Union. As previously mentioned, this year is the first all-female SAB team, and I feel like that in itself is women, for example, making history again. And I feel like as women, it's really important to support each other because, as previously mentioned, yes, black women have different experiences from white women. Class plays a big part, but it's also ensuring that despite these differences, we come together and unite and speak on the issues that we encounter also from a black woman's perspective, from a white woman's perspective, just ensuring that we're aware of each other's struggles and we still unite despite that.
Yeah, so one of the things that you mentioned is how women make up 56% of people who are in university, but then that isn't fully represented when it comes to academia. Yeah. So what are some of the ways that you think you'd be able to work with whoever gets nominated to be the women's representative to kind of encourage students on campus to go into academia?
Yeah, I feel like a lot can be done in the sense of it takes one person to sort of make a change, and by having that conversation is what initially triggers that change in one person, and also building confidence up in a lot of people, because some people have dreams and aspirations that they might not necessarily feel confident about, but having these conversations and representation is so important. Saying, for example, I am the first female VP voice, that sort of thing, just empowering other students that it's possible for you to achieve certain things.
Yeah, definitely, that's so true. And then also another thing that Harriet brought up was how the Copperfield Society has gone dormant, but how other societies like the Dodgeball Society are continuing to fundraise. How do you think that you can kind of work with those kind of societies that may have times where they're really active and times where they're dormant, but are integral to representing certain groups? How do you think you'd be able to help those as student union and then with the representative?
Yeah, the student union ultimately represents like sports clubs and societies. So even though the society is currently dormant, a student could run for a position of president or so forth to then make the society come back to life again, and also proactively fundraise and campaign on certain issues they care about. And if a student also has like a particular society they want to create, they can also do that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And what are some of the ways that you think that the representative would be able to work directly with the university to ensure that women are fully represented and included in making policy, and also in stuff like how Nadia mentioned earlier, like representing women in reading lists and representing women in academics? How are some of the ways that you think they could work directly with the university?
I feel like they could work with the university in so many different ways. It just depends on what specific aspect they want to tackle. So for example, if you're a STEM student, the best approach could be speaking to your STEM lecturers and creating events for females in STEM, because females in STEM aren't necessarily as equally represented by the male gender. And I feel like having those conversations and making sure that representation is present is very important. And one of the points that Nadia previously raised with regards to the literature, for example, because most of the literature we do read on our courses tend to be written by like white male, and that's just how it is. But I feel like it's really important for there to be diverse types of literature, because society is so diverse and it should be reflected within the things that we read. And that was also one of my manifesto points, which I started when I was previously on the Voice Zone committee, and something I'm doing this year as VP Voice, ensuring that the literature we read is representative of the people within society, be that literature by disabled authors, women, LGBT authors and so forth. And I just feel like representation is really important, and giving women the platform to speak on these issues and create change is very important.
Yeah, definitely. And I watched the VP introduction video where you guys were all dressed up as all like the women from history. And it's such a cool thing to have an all-female SAB team. So how do you feel like that is going to influence future people who might want to run for Surrey Decides, or even like into higher office? Because seeing women represented in Students' Union could encourage other women to apply for like top leadership roles, to apply for other political roles. How do you think that that's going to shape the student body?
I feel like it will definitely shape the student body in a very positive way, because as previously mentioned, we are the first female SAB team, and the Students' Union has been around for quite a few years, and the fact that this is the first year whereby we're all female SAB team. Amina's the first black female VP community. I'm the first female VP voice. Just these little achievements has like shown how we've progressed over time, and shown that women are able to do things that men could do just as well. And it's just about taking the courage to go for these positions which you feel so passionate about, and also acknowledging the attributes you bring within yourself, because you are a woman, and you just need to embrace that wholeheartedly and just accept it for what it is.
For sure, for sure. And also, Harriet kind of mentioned how she wants to become the women's representative, but that how she also wanted to represent issues that men face that have to do with the patriarchy. For example, men's mental health. How are some of the ways that you think that the next representative could work with both the Students' Union and the university to kind of make sure things like men's mental health are represented in policy and activities?
Yeah, I feel like men's mental health is such an important thing to consider, because most people tend to see the impact of patriarchy from a woman's perspective, but we also need to affect that the ideology of what the perfect man is also perpetuated through social media and also impacts men as well. And I feel like speaking on the issues that men encounter, for example, suicide prevention campaigns, No Shave November, for example, just those sort of little things that make such a big difference is very important. And talking to university staff about the relevance of this issue, because not only is it an issue that affects men, women also are affected by similar situations, for example, mental health. And it's about, yes, we're different in regards to gender, but we're also united in the sense that we're all human beings and we can still have the same mental health struggles. And I feel like that's something to also highlight and work on.
That's definitely true. And one last question that I had for you is, obviously you're VP Voice, but could you tell us a little bit more about the Liberation Committee and how they're able to work with all 4 different zones of the union?
Yes, so the Liberation Committee currently sit under the President, and they're a committee of 8 students. They can also work alongside the union, because in the union there are 4 zones. So there's the Voice Zone, the Activity Zone, the Support Zone, and Community Zone. So each zone focuses on different things. And the Liberation Committee, for example, say if they wanted to run a campaign, like what Harriet previously mentioned, they could come into the Voice Zone, for example, because the Voice Zone is for students who have something to say. And if you have a campaign on something you're really passionate about, you could perhaps go to the Voice Zone to do that. If you wanted to run an event within Rubik's or something, you would go to Community Zone. So acknowledging that the union is divided by 4 different zones, but the zones still work together interconnectedly.
Amazing, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. So for those just tuning in, today is the first of 2 nights of our Liberation Committee election Meet the Candidate sessions. So far tonight, first of all, we had our panel, which included the nominees for both the LGBT plus representative and the trans and non-binary representative. And then we had a panel with the nominees running for the women's representative. And next we're gonna have a panel which will encompass all of the nominees who are gonna be running for the disability, neurodiversity, and chronic illness representative. So the disability, neurodiversity, and chronic illness representative will both sit on the Students' Union, and they will also be a part of the content capture access group, as well as working with the university to make campus more accessible. So tonight we have 3 different nominees who are going to be running for this position. So I'm going to hand over to the chair, Theo.
Hello and welcome back to the last Meet the Candidates for the session this evening. I'm Theo, and in this discussion we'll be hearing the candidates for the position of disability and neurodiversity and chronic illness. In this election we've got Lauren and Ajay contending. Would you please introduce yourselves and why you put yourself forward? Lauren, would you like to start?
So I'm Lauren, I'm a second year student paramedic, and the main reason that I put myself forward is as someone who has multiple disabilities and kind of has a chronic illness as well. This is something that I'm really passionate about. I think the university on the whole is really good at supporting students, but I think from a student's perspective as well, it'd be really good to get involved with like how to basically make it equal for every student who comes here.
Very nice.
Hi, I'm Ajay. There we go. And I'm a second year events management student. I would like to candidate myself for this role because I am too passionate about this subject, and I do see that the university is doing a lot, but I feel like students should have more voice in it, and I would love to communicate with other students that as well have issues, medical issues, and just help them out as much as possible.
Thank you very much. On to the first question. In 2015/16, the Higher Education Statistics Agency reported that 4.6% of the university staff disclosed as disabled. Compare that to the 11.3% of university students. Do you think there is enough awareness amongst staff of what it's like to be a disabled student with neurodiversity and/or chronic illness? You started last time, so.
Oh. Well, I think that there is awareness for sure. Like people do know what's going on, and the university does quite a bit to like spread awareness and stuff. But I do feel like from a student's perspective, and I think there's just not enough. I feel like there's so many things that have to be taken into consideration, and obviously it's hard because there's so many disabilities, chronic illnesses, that it's hard to make everyone aware of everything, but I think something more could definitely be done.
Has there ever been a time when you as a student here have had an experience, obviously you don't have to go into details, but with a member of staff when you felt they didn't appreciate the extent of your disability and you would have liked there to have been a little bit more training or something along that lines?
I was lucky enough to actually have lecturers and tutors that were really understanding, but I have had that with other students. When it came to group projects, sometimes I just could not make it out of bed because medication changes or just seizures in my sleep, and they did not, they were pretty insensitive about it, and I think that's really important because many people blame it on the university maybe, but I think other students should be made aware of how hard it can be to live with a disability, chronic illness, general mental condition. But with the staff, as I said, I got pretty lucky. Yeah.
Lauren?
I think that is a statistic which kind of goes in itself. I think there needs to be more awareness. I do think, on the whole, the university are really good. Obviously, I'm talking from my faculty that I think that the support that I've received is great, but I think one of the hardest things quite often comes down to the invisible illnesses and disabilities that there are, because I think people can often perceive what they see. And if you appear to look well and look able to cope with your studies, with whatever, and then I think people expect you to be okay with that. I think that there can always be more awareness and support. And kind of like an understanding from staff, and that's something that I definitely wanted to kind of work towards, was kind of liaising with different faculties and schools, because from speaking to other students, one thing that I have found is that unfortunately I don't think all the faculties and schools in the university are at the same level. Yeah. I think that one thing that I want greatly is that students have an equal amount of support regardless of what school they're under, and I don't necessarily think that's the case at the moment. Which obviously, was it 4.3? Was it, or 5? What percent of staff?
And 11.3 of students.
Okay, it's obviously that's not.
And that's declared, of course. Right.
Well, yeah, there is that as well. I think that's a declared disability. I think some people might not actually define themselves as having a disability if they've got a chronic illness, which is fine. That's amongst themselves, but. I think there's still a way to go, and that's something that I definitely want to work towards, is bridging that understanding and awareness for those 11.5.
Thank you very much. Lovely answers all round. Second question. It's number 3 on here. Sometimes the university may take an idea to support a specific group of students and broaden it to try and help everyone. How can we change the culture to make the university better recognise the need for flexibility when tailoring support for particular groups of students?
So I think with disabled students as a whole, it's quite hard because it's such a broad term. It covers such a wide variety of students as well, and I think it's really important to treat kind of students almost on an individualised basis. I don't think that is always the case. I don't think that's something that can always be done. Obviously, you've got so many students, you can't treat them all individually, but I think...
I misread the question. Particular groups of students.
Particular groups. I think different groups, again, need to be tailored for different kind of... They have different needs. In terms of disabilities, I think chronic illnesses, I'm just talking about certain groups here, but like you've got your physical disabilities and potentially your long-term mental health disabilities, your short-term disabilities, your additional learning support needs. I think those students need to feel that they're listened to, I think, on an individual basis. I know I'm kind of talking more about individuals here, but I think it's an understanding that people are still individuals within those groups. But I think the culture change as such, I think it needs to be more kind of adaptable, I think, and understand that people have different needs. But I think on the whole it's going in the right direction, definitely.
Ajay?
As you said as well, I do believe that, like, obviously, yes, people tend to like put everyone into groups, for example, mental illnesses together, and then maybe chronic illnesses together, and then more general disability. I think it's hard to put them into groups because, for example, with my epilepsy, I can't relate to anyone else that has epilepsy because there's so many variations of it that obviously it's hard. It's practically impossible to go to every student individually and just give them a different kind of support. So I do understand why the university would put them into groups, but I think it is extremely important to know that every disorder, illness, anything has so many different sides to it. And also, I think it's not only the medical condition is not the only issue. I think the side effects of the medications, sometimes, in my case, for example, they can be so much worse. And I think, obviously, it is convenient to put everyone in a certain group and try to help them out accordingly. But unfortunately, like, every individual works in a different way, reacts to help in a different way. I feel like some people maybe would like to be helped in this way. Some people would like to be helped in another way. But I think, yes, the uni is doing quite a lot to try and include us all and make us feel not accepted, but like supported, and is giving us the right kind of help.
Thank you very much. Third question. This year, the union has succeeded in changing the extenuating circumstances process so that a student with a chronic illness does not need to pay for new evidence, for example, a doctor's note, each time they claim free seats. How else might the union work to ensure the university processes are better accommodated for students with a diverse need? You started last time, you started this time.
Sorry, I zoned out. I'm sorry. I had a little absence, but thank you.
The students' union got the university to change the way extenuating circumstances were applied for. In, say, the case of you had a chronic illness, you didn't need to keep paying every time. So that was a really good success that we had this year. So looking more forward, how else is there be a way to change the university's processes in a similar way to accommodate students with disabilities?
Okay, thank you. Well, I do feel like many people still avoid asking for extenuating circumstances because I feel like it's such a long procedure, and I think it's great that they reduce the cost. They cut off the cost to get new proof every time, but I do feel like there should be maybe an easier way to do it. Like for example, I have never applied for it because I feel like when I talk to other people who do have it, I feel like they have to go through such a long procedure, and I'm an international student, so I'd have to go back to Brussels, go to my doctors, and I think it's obvious that the university needs proof.
Not just about ECs though. So
in general.
In general.
Okay,
so using that as an example, in a way that the process has been changed for the better, is there any other sort of bureaucratic processes that you'd like to see changed or improved?
Definitely. Concerning the GP, well, I don't know if you've probably all heard that now the new students had to find another medical center. I think obviously it's understandable because it's no one's fault really. Low on funds, or like obviously there's just a certain amount of people that the university can help out in that medical center. But I do think that there should be some kind of drop-in sessions for students with disabilities, chronic illnesses, just like to support. I know there's the Center of Wellbeing, but like on a more medical, for example, for prescription stuff, I think these things should be done way quicker, because when you have, like, everything can change so fast when you do suffer from a medical condition. And I think sometimes the wait is so long, even like for accommodation, I had to wait quite a while if I knew to know if I was going to have accommodation on campus or not. And it's just like, obviously the uni is super busy and I do understand that, but maybe they should have like another group just to take care of students with disabilities, because sometimes they're new as well. They get diagnosed during their uni times and it's hard because you're far away from home, and it's just, maybe there could be a little extra category just to support. I don't know.
Thanks very much. Lauren, would you want to repeat the question, or
No,
you good?
Okay, I think from going alongside the extenuating circumstances, which I think is really great, with having applied myself, I know that the hassle that involved and taking out one kind of stress factor makes a huge difference. I think running alongside that, students that have to take either an interrupt from their studies or having to repeat a year for medical reasons, which happens. I mean, I had to take an interrupt for medical reasons, and I think there's a lot of people get so worried about doing that, and even applying for ECs, that actually it's not. There's almost is a bit of a stigma attached to it sometimes, where taking that time out. But I think there needs to be more support when students are coming back to be reintegrated from having time out, maybe, or just in the process itself. Quite often, finding the proof, getting the right proof for those things. I know when I had to do it, it was quite straightforward because it was quite a clear-cut reason for having to take time out. But I know, particularly with some more invisible illnesses, or maybe people that don't have a diagnosis yet, I know that's a big thing. So a lot of people will be suffering with like medical conditions, but just because they don't have a diagnosis shouldn't mean that they don't get the same level of support with that. So I just think alongside taking time out from studies and coming back, I think that would be something that I would be really keen to help kind of support with.
Thank you very much. Second to last question. As we all know, and myself included, the university campus is particularly difficult to navigate without using stairs. The union has championed for this for several years through university committees, and the university has started to commit to improvements. But with still so much to be done, is it time for a change in strategy working with the university on accessibility?
I agree that the university campus isn't the most accessible. Guildford is on a hill. It's obviously got that against it, and I appreciate that there is only so much that can be done from a practical level. I think but this is my 3rd year at the university, and having grown up around Guildford, I think nothing has changed as in terms of the structuring, but I think maybe a new approach is needed. I think it's definitely moved forward a lot, and I think there's one thing that I have noticed is more for prospective students to kind of get them to get a feel for the university themselves, particularly if they do have some sort of kind of physical disability that does make it hard to get around. But I think there needs to be maybe more of a kind of clear-cut plan as to what can be done. I think you've mentioned it yourself, but getting stuck in the lift at Rubik's multiple times isn't a good thing to happen, and it's a case of, okay, what can be done, and just kind of communicating that with other students. But I mean, Guildford's on a hill, you are up against it naturally, but I think there is their way. I think one thing which I know, having spent time in a wheelchair myself, buses is a nightmare. And obviously there's the buses from one campus to the other, but how often have you tried to get on a bus and there's no space? And I'm not necessarily sure of an exact answer to that, but I think that's one way which obviously helps with mobility, because particularly if you can't walk the long distance. But actually, I've got on a bus before on campus going into town when I was on crutches, yet I'm not someone who I know personally goes, actually, can I have a seat? Can I sit down? But no one got up to move. Yeah. And I think that's about maybe getting more awareness around students, that actually if someone gets on the bus and needs a seat, then offer it to them. It might only be like a short trip, but that's something that I actually found particularly striking amongst students, and that was the students themselves, that people weren't really accepting around disability, and that's something that I would really like to, I think that, and that is just awareness as such, but I think that would just help from a personal level in terms of accessibility around campus.
Awesome, thank you very much. Ajay, would you like me to repeat the question, or are you?
Yes, maybe, I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. So, university campus is rather difficult to navigate in a wheelchair. The union has championed this for several years through university committees, and the university is now committed to these improvements. But with still so much to be done, is it time for a change in strategy with the university accessibility?
Thank you. Obviously, yes, as we can all agree, the campus is very hilly and there's so many stairs. And I think an issue as well is that it's not like there's stairs and then there's a ramp right next to it. Many times you'd have to take a completely different road. So I think maybe the university could already work on that, maybe more ramps, more accessibility. And also about the bus situation, I had no idea things like that happen, because I think for most people it's common sense to just get up when you see someone with a disability or that needs to sit. I think that's something that is taught in kindergarten pretty much. So I actually had no idea you experienced that. But yeah, definitely, if that is still an issue, I think awareness is basically one of the only solutions, because I think people don't realize how hard it is to live with a medical condition. Obviously, all my conditions are invisible, so I don't really know how it is, but after hearing what you said, I think something really, really needs to be done. And obviously the university does not own the buses in Guildford, but maybe they could get in contact with the company and maybe suggest designing maybe some kind of I know it's hard to realize, like to make, but I think at least proposing this idea to the company that produces that makes the buses, maybe that could already help a bit. and definitely just like for the infrastructure, just like add a ramp and make sure that students can just take the short way to their lectures, because it is a campus that has so many stairs and sometimes the lifts are broken in the library, for example. I think, as well as awareness, as you already said, I think the university should really try and focus the infrastructure as well, try to adapt it more and take that more into consideration.
Thank you very much. I'm sensing a big awareness drive here from both of you, so I like that. Last question, don't worry, and I'll let you go. So, how do you think we can increase the representation and support for students with invisible illness without expecting those students with the invisible illnesses to do all of the hard work themselves?
I think we should definitely give them like a chance to have some drop-in sessions. Like they could just come to a person and be like, I'm facing this and this issue. Could you help me maybe in this way? And I think there's so many types of medical conditions that in the end I think, sorry, I had a blackout again. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Have a read.
Thank you, I'm sorry. Right, so I think definitely, again, spreading awareness is such an important part of this, because other students, if they knew about the struggles, they would also be more keen on helping, taking the initiation, the initiative to help the other students. If they knew how hard it was, yes, maybe they would be like, oh, I heard this and that, so maybe I could help them in this way. Because obviously sometimes it's also hard to ask for help because you don't want to be a burden. I've had that in the past. So you're kind of on your own sometimes. I think it's already great that the Center of Wellbeing offers support, but I think maybe a bit more could be done. I think also, as we mentioned previously, maybe the lecturers and the head of school could like help the students out, as well as the Center of Wellbeing, because obviously there is a high request. And I don't know, I feel like overall, yes, again, as cliche as it sounds, I think raising awareness is the most important thing, and it's something that we can do so easily by having, for example, guest speakers or just students that would like to tell their stories, and just have them, you know, maybe work with societies that could film them, that could raise awareness and share the stories. I know there's this group called Be Visible that got created by 2 students here, and it is great. There's a group chat, we all support each other, and I think, yes, the university should really understand that sometimes it can be really hard, and just be there for the student overall.
Thank you very much. Lauren, last one.
Last one. I think it's hard, because I think students obviously put in a lot of the work, but I don't think students can put in all the work. But I think at the same time, where this can be overcome is by getting students to work alongside the university and staff, particularly staff of different faculties. I think one way of doing that is, because ultimately it's staff of students on a day-to-day running that are going to be supporting the students the most, or have the potential to support the students the most. And I would really like to see more kind of awareness amongst invisible illnesses, because I think sometimes it can be so isolating and lonely having an invisible illness, because you sometimes feel that you are so alone. But I agree that students have done so much at the university for that already, and I think it's really good. But I think it's about trying to engage the uni more to kind of understand, I guess, some of the issues that students with an invisible illness face. Because an invisible illness as such can cover such a broad spectrum, from people with mental health issues, people with a learning disability, people with a range of physical issues as well. And I think it's then using what the university already have. So I think, like as mentioned, the Centre for Wellbeing is a really good support for people. And I've definitely utilised their support, but I think it's about working alongside them to promote what they do. I think sometimes people don't necessarily realise, I think it's all put out there, realise what they've already is run by the university. Because I think people sometimes feel that that's all mental health as well, whereas I've actually found them being really helpful to talk to about my physical health issues and kind of the issues that I face within the university, and they will help with that, like either liaise with my my lecturers and that, and they've done that on my behalf, and that's actually where it's worked really well. And so I think students ultimately are going to continue to put in a lot of the work, but I think it's about trying to get the university to kind of understand that they can do a lot too, and just because someone doesn't have a visible disability doesn't make it any less than someone who does have a physical disability, for example, that is visible. I think everyone, it goes back to that equality of everyone getting treated the same and equally, despite what they're going through and what they have to deal with.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. That's all we have time for. And thank you to everyone who've participated this evening. Particularly thank you for so much to all of you for sharing your personal experiences. For the last commentary of the night, we're heading back to Stag Radio. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow, 8 p.m. after exec, and we'll hear from the People of Colour representative and non-UK candidates. Voting in Surrey Decides. Liberation will take place tomorrow evening until 6 p.m. on Friday, and is restricted to those who identify in the same group as the Liberation rep. Thank you very much. Good night.
Hi, we're your Students' Union. We've been listening to your feedback, and here are a series of videos to explain some of the positive changes that we would like to see over the next year.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah and I'm your VP Support. I'm here today to talk to you about the NSS results that relate to placement. There were a lot of comments about the placement assessments. So the position of a union is that there should be a specific marking criteria available to students beforehand so students understand what is expected of them. We will lobby the university to push back the placement assessment dates, as we believe it is unreasonable to ask students to write thousands of words while still working full-time. A later deadline would hopefully alleviate the pressure that students on placement feel. From a wellbeing perspective, if your placement is in the UK, you can download the app Hub for Hope that gives you a very detailed list of support services available around you. This could be quite useful if you're in a new city and unfamiliar with the resources available around you. In addition to this, we will launch a networking platform where students on placement can reach out to other PTY students in their city, whether this be in the UK or abroad, to develop a University of Surrey community outside of Guildford. That's all from me. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.
And that was the panel for disability, neurodiversity and chronic illness. So there's a lot to talk about, but Ajay and Theo, I was just wondering, what are your initial thoughts on that panel?
Well, I really felt the big takeaway from that was awareness. That seemed to be the key theme that they kept coming up and up. And, you know, it's good and it's bad, because on the one hand, you know, it's sad that there clearly hasn't been enough awareness, but equally it's a fairly easy problem to solve. It's not like, you know, we haven't got to move mountains here, we've just got to get out there and do it. And that's what we're here for. Yeah. I'm excited.
I completely agree with what Theo said. Awareness is a key theme, because if you don't speak on the issues, how will other people be aware of what you're facing? And also letting other people know that it's really good to speak out so everyone understands what you're going through and can then put the right things in place to support students.
Definitely. So were there any specific activities or like pledges that the candidates made that you guys found particularly interesting, that you think the Students' Union or university could do more for?
I'm not gonna lie, I can't remember a huge amount. It was all a bit of a blur for me. What about you? What do you guys thought over here?
I feel like there were good conversations mentioned, but like previously I said, awareness is literally such a big part of everything.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Ajay mentioned the Be Visible group and how there's like a real lack of awareness in like everyday student about invisible illnesses and stuff like that. So how do you think the union can help to combat that kind of thing and kind of get that education and awareness across campus?
It's really difficult, isn't it? Because you're growing up in a society where, you know, if you're not like me and you don't need a chair, then there's nothing wrong with you. And it's very hard, particularly when you've got such a diverse group of people, like at a university. You've got people from one culture, and then so and also many cultures, all sorts of things, and what may be a way of reaching to one group might not necessarily work with another. So I don't know. To be honest, it's difficult, but hopefully we can make some progress with it.
Yeah. I feel like changes can be made, which is something previously mentioned this year in the union. There's now the implementation going forward of self-certified ECs, whereas previously, in order to be able to claim an extenuating circumstance, students would have to submit a medical note, and more often than not, students would have to pay for the medical note, so £20, for example. But now with the implementation of self-certified ECs, students don't need to go to a doctor to obtain a medical note and pay the £20, which can often be quite, what's the word should I use? Can't think of a word. Can you think of a word? Which can be quite tiresome, should I say, and expensive, because say if you're someone who struggles with like mental illness or like a physical disability, something like that. Imagine having to constantly pay funds to receive a medical note. But with the implementation of self-certified ECs, you can merely say, this is like what I'm going through. It can then be approved, and you'll be given opportunity, for example, to defer your assessments. And that's also something students should also be aware of, because having an EC is not just like an easy route out, which some student thinks, oh, you're just deferring your exams or you're getting a better grade. Students take ECs because they feel the need to do so, and ECs don't necessarily place them in a better position. It only defers their exam to a later date. It doesn't give them like an extra 10% or so. It's just something to support students who need the support.
Definitely. And the Disability, Neurodiversity and Chronic Illnesses representative wouldn't just sit on the Students' Union, they'll also sit on a number of university boards. So do you guys have any advice or tips for the future representative on like ways to be able to engage with the university on representing their groups?
For me, from my experience with that sort of role, is don't assume anything, because there are genuinely things that you as a person with disabilities or chronic illness or whatever, you might assume is obvious, and the big university machine has not caught up with it yet. So if you've got to go in there and tell them red is red and blue is blue, then you've got to do it, and don't be afraid to say it.
Definitely. Yeah?
I completely agree with what Theo's saying, because some people tend to find it quite daunting to speak to relevant university staff members, but you also need to understand that they are also there to serve you, and if you explain your experience with perhaps a disability, they'll be able to hopefully empathise with you and do the right things they need to do to support you by detailing your own experiences and the experiences of other students, which will provide them with the information they need to have to implement the positive steps going forward.
Definitely. So this was the last panel of the night, but tomorrow we've got 2 more panels going on, as well as the Tuesday exec. So what are you guys looking forward to in tomorrow's panel? And like, are there any issues that you're going to be discussing in the exec that might be in relation to the Liberation Committee?
Yeah, I'm really excited for execs. My first exec of the year. Hell yeah. So there's much we're discussing concerns whether or not some of the Liberation reps will end up having a vote on exec, which is obviously really important, and it will take the Liberation rep to a new level of importance, and that's really exciting. And the guys we've seen here today have showed, they're ready to do it.
Yeah.
It'll be cool.
And I feel like to echo what Theo previously mentioned, so on exec as it currently stands, it's the 4 VPs and 2 executive members on each zone that sit on exec, and they're given the right to vote on like policy motion put forward by other students, whereas as it currently stands, the 4 Liberation Committee members can sit on exec but only have priority when it comes to speaking on a particular issue. But with the new motion put forward, they'd like to see the implementation of 2 Liberation Committee members being able to actually vote on exec. So that's what we'll be discussing tomorrow.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You explain that way better than I do.
No,
I'm glad you did.
You're both so good at it.
I'm glad you're here.
Thank you so much. So that marks the end of today's Liberation Committee Meet the Candidate session. Just to recap, today we were able to have panels with the LGBT plus representative, as well as the trans and non-binary representative. We were also able to speak to one of the nominees who is running for the female representative as well. And finally, we were able to speak to a few of the nominees who are running for the Disability, Neurodiversity and Chronic Illnesses representatives. Tomorrow we're going to have 2 more panels, and they're going to be on almost 5 groups, I think, actually. So the first panel that it's going to be is going to be the non-UK student, and then we're also going to have a combined panel, which is going to combine the nominees for the Black representative, the Arab student representative, and the Asian student representative. So those panels will be happening tomorrow evening after the exec panel. So if you're interested, come back to the same live stream and we'll be speaking to the rest of the Liberation Committee representatives. Voting for the Liberation Committee representatives will open tomorrow night, and they'll be open up until 6 p.m. on Friday. But I think that is all for today. So thank you once again for everybody who came, all of the nominees, all of the crew, all of the chairs, AJ, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.